Hey everybody, what's up? It's Chase. Welcome to another episode of the show. Today's guest is Ryan Holiday. You probably know Ryan. He's been on the show a couple times. In case you don't, you've been living under a rock because Ryan's work is so popular these days. Ryan Holiday dropped out of college at 19 to apprentice under Robert Greene, the author. He then was a marketer at American Apparel. He went on to found a creative agency and then started writing books on his own, where he has written, I think, 10 books, most of them bestsellers, including Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, The Daily Stoic, and Stillness is the Key, which has sold millions and millions of copies around the world, 30 languages, something like that. I consider Ryan a dear friend, and today we're having him on the show to talk about how to live the life that you want on your terms by being incredibly practical. And the book in particular is about the Stoics. It's called Lives of the Stoics. And right now you're thinking, wait a minute, I don't even know what Stoic philosophy is. This is a great primer, and more importantly, it is an amazing way of thinking. It's not telling you what to think, but it's telling you how to think. And I think you're going to get a treat out of today's episode. Ryan, not only is he super smart and talented at writing books, but he's an incredible communicator. So please join me in welcoming Ryan to the show. Let's get into it. 3, 2, 1. Take it away. How's it going, dude?
I'm doing good, man.
Nice to see your face on the screen here. It's been a
Yeah,
little bit.
it's been a long time.
Describe what's happening. Where are you? What's going on in your world?
I'm I'm hanging out. I'm in my office, just winding down the day, winding down another week. What has it been? Fucking 9 months of this.
Oh God.
I had a weird thing. So like, I have an Apple Watch, and it like records like, hey, you have like a 10-day streak or whatever, and I I noticed. So it's gotten in. It's, I don't know. It's like 150 days or 200 days or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say you're discrediting yourself. I saw your Insta story the other day. It was like a 162.
Okay, but so here's the crazy thing. It's actually at like 200, but it's something glitched on the watch, and it started counting, and like it started losing days, like it was going in the wrong direction. And I didn't even notice because all the days have blurred together and I've lost all track of time.
Well, I don't know, man. I don't know if that's something the Stoic would say. Would a Stoic say the watch glitched, or would the Stoic own it?
Well, what I'm saying is that when you're so locked into a routine, it doesn't matter what's going on, and you even lose track of the passage of time, and that's where I am.
Well, for those who, if you haven't gathered, Ryan and I go way back, and he's been on the show. I think this is your fourth time, bud.
I
And
think so.
each of these has been timed with one of your epic book releases, and we've had you on. I think not all of them, because you got 10 books now, right? Is that true? The
I
10?
think it's 10 or 11. Again, I've also lost track of that as well. It all blurs together.
It's like losing. Now, you don't tell me you've lost track of how many kids you have, too, right?
That's thankfully a small enough number that I can't easily forget.
Awesome. Well, good to have you on the show. And
Yeah.
for those listening, we'll probably do a little bit of a recap, because believe it or not, there are a handful of people on the planet who haven't read your material. It's our goal today to reach some new folks, but we're going to start by retracing my little outline for our conversation today.
Okay.
Starts way back with the book that, well, actually, I want to start before you were an author, and then we'll go to the book that I
Okay.
think has come back in a weird way. So there was a time when you weren't an author, and when you worked for authors, and you were the vice president of marketing, or director of marketing rather, for a fancy clothing brand, or a gritty clothing brand, and you cut your teeth in I think, a really interesting way. So why don't you give me like the 60-second, or give the folks at home a 60-second version of that. And then I want to figure out how you made this jump from not being an author to being one, because that is the task of a lot of the people listening and watching right now, is that they're doing something they don't want to be doing, and they're trying to go to the thing they want to be. So help us understand your journey in both of those.
I think I was in a similar place where I sort of vaguely understood that I wanted to be a writer, but I also knew that no one was lining up to give college students any book deals, and I didn't have anything to say. And so I sort of set my sights on just doing interesting stuff and sort of preparing eventually for a career where I could be a writer. And so I dropped out of college when I was about 20, and I worked for a bunch of different authors, sort of doing internet marketing stuff. And I ended up ultimately being the director of marketing at a company that people used to be familiar with, but no longer so familiar with, called American Apparel, which was at the time one of the biggest fashion brands in the world. Uh, and so there was this period where I was sort of training and learning and experiencing things, and ultimately moving towards, being able to write a book someday. And my first book came out in 2012, which is sort of an expose on how the world of marketing really works. But for me, it was the idea that to write a book that people would want to read, it has to be based on real experiences and an interesting life, and it's going to draw on all your connections and relationships. So there was basically from 19 to 26 when that book came out. That was me sort of paying my dues, cutting your teeth, as you said, setting up the stage so that I could make what seemed like an abrupt transition to some people, but in fact had sort of been sort of pretty strategically laid out.
What about income? Like, I want to go like very tactically, because right now most people are, well, aside from the pandemic, which has ravaged the economy, the people who are doing a thing that they don't want to be doing, uh, they mostly are stuck there. The reasons that I hear are financial. I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't put enough money in the bank in order, because I don't make enough in order to save up enough to take the leap to do the thing. So give me a tactic on how you did that first. And I think what I'm trying to do right now is set the table for, again, the handful of people who aren't familiar with your work, that you actually you weren't born a writer. You weren't,
Yeah, yeah.
you didn't come out of the womb with a keyboard in your hand.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about this morning. I had Matt Berninger on my podcast, the lead singer of the National, and I was reading about his story, and he had a similar story where he had been like an ad executive up until the band had put out like I think two or three different albums, and that was actually very similar to what I did. So yes, I took this leap to be an author, and I sort of partially walked away from the job, but it was a similar thing where one. It's like I was ready to make the leap, but it turned out because I had a skill set and a set of skills that were in demand, I didn't. I guess you don't have to blow up your life to become an artist, and in fact, the that I had a day job and that I'd cultivated and ultimately ended up building a little bit of a business or a side business and all this stuff put me in a position to actually take bigger creative risks. Like not only was I writing about what I'd learned in my job, but then also for my I I I left American Apparel in the fall of 2014. And so I'd actually put out three books before I left. So I'm not I think look, I dropped out of college. I didn't stay in college and then, do all this other stuff. So I definitely am a proponent. Sometimes you got to take that big leap, but you don't always have to burn the boats behind you. And for me, being able to write the books while having a day job allowed me, my first book I got paid, I got a nice, chunk of change for. But my second book, which is actually really my third book, which is which was The Obstacle is the Way, the publisher was not super excited about a book of ancient philosophy, as you can imagine. uh, and so part of the, I'm, I think I would have done it anyway, but the point is, I wasn't that concerned with, you know, up front what that project was going to earn because I didn't, it's not that I didn't need it, but it's that I didn't need it to live,
Yeah.
so the starving artist position can be actually, although creatively liberating in some ways, I think also creatively constraining in other ways.
Yeah, and that's, we've had a similar conversation before, not recorded, but just, over tacos. And and I think this is this is part of the journey. Now you're, I don't know how many bestsellers you got out of that 10. The Daily Stoic, that has been on the list forever. Lives of the Stoics, the one we're going to talk about today, has been obviously hitting. And I think you're maybe north of 1 million copies now on Ego or the trifecta at least. So to say that you're successful in your area of focus and passion is an understatement. And the thing that is just, it repeats itself over and over in pop culture, and especially when shit gets hard with the economy and life, is people get down, people get frustrated, and there's this understanding, or there's a lack of understanding of how, someone got from point A to point B. And I know it's hard for people out there who are already large fans of yours, because when your name pops up on the podcast, when it's in someone's feed and they're going, oh, I'm going to go listen to this, they think they're knowing what they're getting. But the fact that you had to actually start from zero and go to one, I think is healthy for people to figure out.
Well,
So
look, I mean, I started from zero in the sense that, like, look, none of my parents' friends were artists. None of my parents' friends wrote books. I don't think I was thinking about this probably not until college. Did I ever meet a single uh, did I meet a single person who, like, adult, who didn't have a job? And in fact, I grew up in Sacramento, which is a government town, so almost everyone had like government jobs. It wasn't like my dad was a police officer, my mom was a school principal. I not even like, oh, this person's an executive at an entertainment company. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
like I remember, yeah, I don't remember anyone having jobs, having anything but jobs, right? So it was very unfamiliar in that sense. On the other hand, I left college without any debt. I'm a white male. Like I had all sorts of advantages in that sense. But I think so look, is it hard to be an artist? Is it difficult? Are there all sorts of institutional and cultural barriers? Of course. But I would also say there's this barrier that I think deters a lot of, let's just call it, normal people who really shouldn't be intimidated or scared at all, who think that, like, well, I can't, I've got a mortgage, or I have, I can't afford to do it. It's like, being a writer is hard, no question. But, like, it was only until somewhat recently, I would say, that it even began to consume the all of my time. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
it's very possible to do these things while you're doing other things, especially now. I mean, even when I started, my first book came out in 2012. Just like, nobody had podcasts where you had your own audience. Like
I had a
you,
podcast.
you but even you didn't call it I feel like it was a show. I
It
mean,
was
you
a
had like a
show. Yeah, yeah,
produced show, like,
yeah,
that you had to record. I mean, you
yeah.
had a
You flew to
full
Seattle to be on
yeah,
that
I had
show.
to
Yeah,
fly on a plane. You had a set with camera operators and an audience. Like, what you're doing now
yeah,
is 1,000 times cheaper than
yeah.
what you were
Oh,
doing
yeah. Easily a
8 years
thousand.
ago,
Right.
if
This
not
cost me
more.
$12 today.
Yeah. So like, um what all that means, it's not just that it's more affordable, it's that it actually takes fewer waking hours to do it.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like,
Oh,
just
by a
all
long
of it
shot.
is easier in that sense. And so I think it's very possible to do. And not only is it very possible to do it, it's like, think about all the people who managed to do it 100 years ago, with kids and no childcare, worrying of dying of, this or that. I mean, I used to joke, like, people used to worry about dying of the plague, but unfortunately, that's no longer such a distant concern. But I
Yeah,
just mean, like, people have had it harder than you for almost all of history. If you want to be a photographer, or a writer, or a musician, and you can't make it work at least enough on the side to generate some momentum, I am very skeptical that you will be able to do it if all those things went away and you didn't have to worry about money or supporting yourself.
yeah. That's part of, to me, why this is a question that perplexes me. Why I wanted to spend time with you on it. I know you've written at length about, creative blocks, and you talked to. I remember joking with you once about a run. I think I put this in my book. Ryan Holiday talks about a runner's block. Hell no, you're going to get outside and you're
Yeah.
going to go running,
Yeah.
right? And I
Right.
think it's surprising to me, but also still not surprising, because as humans, we have this, multi-million-year-old organ in our skull that's not there to actually make us fulfilled. It's there to help us survive. And we
Sure.
have to actually train it. And the most important part of that training, I think, are the words we say to ourselves. And that in a pretty cool way, I think that arcs back around to the bent that you have been on for now. I'm just gonna put my finger in the air and say 7 years that you've been really focused on Stoic philosophy.
I mean,
So,
I would say it predates the other stuff. I just didn't really publish books about it. But
okay.
that's actually an interesting point, right? So, um, like when Trust Me I'm Lying came out, a bunch of my fans were surprised because what I'd been writing about online was philosophy. Like that's what I was writing about on my blog. So they're like, "Where'd this marketing stuff come from?" And it's like that's what I do every day. I just do this
Right.
stuff on the side. And then when the marketing book succeeded and built an audience, then when I did a stoicism book, people were like, well, what's the transition here? And it's like, actually, there's been no transition. So it's interesting. Like I'll consult with authors. Like people are like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a book, or, I've always wanted to do a book, or I have a book coming out in a year. I just started it, whatever. And I'll go, oh, okay. Like, so what have you written online? And they're like, well, nothing. And you're like, so let me get this straight. Like your goal is to publish a book of writing, and that'd be like, my goal is to do a stand-up special. And I'm like, oh, well, when can I see you perform? And you're like, oh, I've never done it before. Like the way you would succeed on stage and then on television would be to be doing the thing constantly and to build an audience and to build a relationship with that audience. And there's somehow a reluctance to do that with, like, people are like, I want to be a professional photographer, and then it's like, well, where's your photography? And you're like, oh, it's all in my phone, I've never shown it to anyone. And you're like, okay, yeah, that's not how this works.
Right. It's not, you have to be taking your licks and be very public about it. I mean,
Yeah.
that concept of a Netflix special for a comedian is a great one because, we've had Nate Bargatze on the show, you know, Joe Rogan and Kevin Hart, and like they, uh, Nate Bargatze's been on the show, and he said, I performed 7 days a week in New York for almost 10 years. And right now there are people saying like, I don't want to get my material out there before I get my Netflix special. Like that's the mentality, which is exactly the opposite. And I think that that paints a very absurd picture, but what you've
Well, I
done.
started my first I started a blog. I remember I had a friend set up a website for me the day I graduated high school, which was June of 2005, and my first book came out in June of 2012, or July of 2012. So that's many years of writing for which I received zero compensation. Uh, and, but but there's no way that when the book, like, who bought the first 10,000 copies of that book? It was the people that I'd been writing for 7-ish years,
Yeah.
and so it was funny. I always heard about comedians that, like, yeah, I was performing in the clubs for 20 years and then I got a TV show. And I remember as a kid thinking, like, that's impossible, I could never do that. And it was actually only like a few years ago that I did that. It was like, wait, when did I start writing online? When did my first book come out? That's actually, that was a long period of, I wrote almost every day for 7 years before I got my first check for writing. And honestly, that book didn't, I feel like I really hit my stride on my third book. And so, it took a long time. It does, but I think when people think like, oh, 7 years or 10 years or however, they go, I can't do that. And I was thinking I was only thinking A to Z, but there's a bunch of letters in between there. So I wasn't getting paid, but there were certainly like, I didn't shout into the void for 7 years. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I wrote, and I built up an audience, and I had an interaction with that audience, and I got a sense of what was working and not working. And like, I didn't think, I mean, in retrospect, I was a nobody, but in my head, I was writing, I had fans. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't, I was doing the thing. Like I was a writer. I didn't call myself one, but I was a writer and I was writing, and that was what was setting up to eventually be a published author.
Yeah. You've got to do the verb in order to be the noun. And
Totally.
and so having shifted gears or maybe realigned, I'm going to try and speak in
Yeah.
a way that is aligned with the way you just laid it out for us, which is, speaking about writing about Stoic philosophy. You were doing that before. You did some marketing books in the middle there. So you're back in a groove, your lane, the thing that interests and is a focus and passion for you. How would a Stoic approach this problem that we just sort of unpacked? This idea that there's a gap between where I am and where I want to be, and rather than most of us are just sitting there on the couch twiddling our thumbs thinking about it, or in the Netflix example, like I'm saving up all my material for when
Right.
I do my
Well,
Netflix special, which doesn't happen. So what would a Stoic philosopher say about that?
I mean, I think the Stoics would go, okay, like, is this in your control or is it not in your control? If you're not where you'd like to be because you're currently in prison, like there's a certain amount of adjustments you're going to have to make for the reality of your position, right?
Yep.
If you're not where you want to be because yeah, like, look, I can't quit the job because I can't get out of the military. I have a 4-year commitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to go, okay, what can I do with inside this? But a Stoic, I think, would also go, how much of this prison that I'm in is in my own head? And I think for a lot of us, that's what it is. Like, you go, oh, I can't. But of course you can. You know what I mean? Like, of course you can. You just don't want to.
or
Um,
or or that it's hard or it's
yeah,
painful. You
right,
might want
right.
to, but there's like the pain factor. The price of pain outweighs how much you want it. But this is
Yes.
we're I'd like to pat myself on the back here because we're following the script that I'm sort of had some notes here about. It just seems to me, and I'm trying to make 2 points at once. One is how practical stoicism is, and two, that it's all around us, and it's very, very helpful to be able to understand through the lens of either practicality or stoicism that most of the things that stand between where you are right now and where you want to be, they are largely, if they're not a product of your head, then you are in the military or you are fill in the blank, that is an actual uh, hurdle.
Well,
That's one thing, but most things aren't.
I'll give you another example that I talk about in the Lives of the Stoics book. So Seneca is this brilliant philosopher that I know you've read his stuff. Our friend Tim Ferriss is a huge fan. He's a big subject of my books. So one of the interesting things about Seneca is that historically, up until relatively recently, um, historians that there Seneca was a politician as well, and historians found it inconceivable that Seneca the politician, like one of the most powerful men in Rome, could be the same person as Seneca the philosopher, writer, playwright. Right? So he did all these things, and they thought there must be Seneca the politician, and then there's the Seneca the writer. Like, it was inconceivable that they were the same. And I was reading a great writer recently, and he was like, it'd be like if Ralph Waldo Emerson had also been Lincoln's vice president. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Like that, but it was possible.
Yeah.
He was a doer and an artist. And so that when we talk about stoicism being practical and real, it's like, here you had like one of the busiest people in the entire world in his own time, also on the side writing these plays and these letters and these essays, which ultimately have far eclipsed his political accomplishments. But he would have had every reason to say, I don't have time to do that. He would have had every reason to say, people aren't going to take me seriously. I'm a politician who wants to read my poetry or whatever. But he did it. It's, I mean, humanity is the greater for it. But a lot of these limitations about what we think is possible and not possible is just totally artificial, and it's artificial until somebody breaks it. It's like, you can't play football and baseball, and then somebody does it and it's like, oh shit, it is possible. Like, you can do it. It's just, as you said, most of the time the reason people think you can't is because it's actually really, really hard.
Right. Or in the sense of, say, working remotely, which is a world that we're all completely immersed in and was thought to be absolutely unfathomable for all kinds of sectors, is now real because you fucking had to, because
Right.
it's that or
Sure.
death, or it's that or
Yes.
disease, or it's that or illness, and as soon as you can start to wrap your that, it's like the Roger Bannister 4-minute mile. Like it's always impossible until somebody does it. So
Well, Robert Greene talks about like a death ground strategy. He's like, if your back was to the wall, you'd be able to do it, right? And army, like the worst thing, he's like, the worst thing armies can do is put their opponent in a position where they have to fight to the death, right? If the opposing army has an escape route, they'll take it. If you're like stand or die, that's when people are, capable of incredible things. And so sometimes it's about putting yourself in a position like that, right?
mhm,
And so when we're talking about leaping, you don't always have to do it, but sometimes one of the benefits of like, no, I fucking quit this job and I'm finally going to do it is that now you're like, shit, if I don't do it,
no food.
no food. And so, yeah, it's hard and you don't think it's possible, but in fact, if you could reframe it in some way or see it from another perspective, of course it's possible.
Yeah. I think it's interesting also, a little corollary to that is right now, most people who are stuck are whinging about how hard it is to um, do both, to have two jobs and to get up early and write, or to get up early and draw or paint or whatever their mode of expression is, or build that MVP
Yeah.
product that they're going to put out there in the world. But alternatively, like, what if it was your only chance?
Yeah.
Doesn't that make the current problem seem pretty luxurious? Like if you had no other opportunity, you had to actually go sell a photograph this month or you were not going to eat. Doesn't it make it seem pretty good that you have a roof over your head and that you can do things at your own pace because you've got some creature comforts and you have another job? And I think, in there lies, I just keep bringing it back to Stoicism. There's just certain practicality. And if you can reframe an argument and you already cited how prolific Seneca was in so many different areas of life and career and whatnot. Like, and to be fair, like saying how hard other people have it doesn't always work to motivate or inspire. But I'm looking for ways that we can rid ourselves of the stories that we're telling ourselves, and or at least recognize that 90% of them are stories. And to your point earlier, there are people for who are this are we are speaking from a place of privilege. You and I are both white and male, and I want to make sure that we include the same thing could be true, but through a different lens from virtually anyone. Like there are areas or are factors that life that unequivocally are huge barriers that we can't possibly consider everything in our discussion right now. But the reality is that people have overcome huge obstacles, and the one that you're struggling with right now is probably overcomable as well.
So not only have people overcome, like I think it can be almost not direct enough to go like people have overcome
Right.
horrible
Yeah.
obstacles.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure. First off, think about the things you've overcome in your own life. But you are a direct descendant of those people, or you wouldn't be here. Like you come from an unbroken line of successful ancestors who endured things that are worse than whatever we're going through right now. I mean, like, look, all of your ancestors, or sorry, at least one of your ancestors survived the Spanish flu. At least one of your ancestors survived World War II, survived the Black Death, survived anything you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
We are a descendant from those people, right? So
Yep.
like you don't come from an unbroken line of losers by definition. Evolutionarily, that doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
right? You come from an unbroken line of people who've been through real shit. The human species has, uh, if you take for granted that like humanity is progressing, right? Which we clearly are. I mean, I'd rather be alive now than 500 years ago and a
Yeah.
thousand years
Despite what
ago.
you'd read from the news, it's the
Yeah.
safest time to be alive by orders of magnitude. Yes.
So you're descended from those people that got through that shit to now. And, I think that can put some of the self-pity that you feel in perspective, and that's what I try to remind myself of.
If you, again, let's go back to Stoicism for a second, because we haven't gone deep there, but part of so much, rather, of what, not just part, so much what we're talking about has a very crisp place to in Stoic philosophy. And I mentioned it being very utilitarian and practical and all these things. And I want to understand when you either, if, I don't know if you would call it fell in love or were inspired by, or why don't you tell us, how it first captured your head and heart. And I remember reading personally when I decided that I wanted to be a professional artist. I wanted to make things for a living. I wanted to
Yeah.
make photographs and books and businesses. And so I started reading biographies of my favorite artists. And I'm
Hmm.
wondering what your experience was with Stoicism. And so tell us about that first sort of fire and how you think of it now. Are you still reading those things to be
Totally.
inspired?
I mean, I think this is my like 15-year-old copy of Meditations right here. So I was introduced to the Stoics at about 19 years old when I was still in college, and I read this book, and it was just like, oh, this is it. Like this is what I needed. This is the advice that I needed. It's obviously been a journey since then. I mean, the Stoics even talk about this, the idea that you don't step in the same river twice. Like I imagine if you reread today some of those formative biographies of artists that you read that got you inspired when you started, you'd have a totally different reaction to it. You'd be like, oh shit, Picasso was awful. Like, I don't want
Right.
to be
Yeah.
like him at all, or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
whatever it is. Um, uh, but I think there's something to, just getting the stuff straight from the source, and then you go out and you experience things, and then you return to the source, and it's sort of this sort of feedback loop between the inspiration and experience. And so I don't know why it struck me the way that it did, but I think I think I've been reflecting on this recently. It's like when I first read it, I really got a lot of the productivity benefits out of it, and then as I got a little bit older, I got more of a resiliency side of it, and then it was the ethical formulations, and like every time I've gone back to that well, I've drawn something different back out of it, and so that's been the journey that I've been on.
Um, Now, we're going to put a pin in that just for a second.
Okay.
And so I'd like to cover the ground of your latest book, which is The Lives of the Stoics. And we're doing it indirectly here. I want to go into a couple specific chapters. One in particular, Seneca the Striver, because
Yeah.
Seneca is such a factor in your world. But the fact that if we put a pin in the actual book, which
Hmm.
I loved the Daily Stoic, which it was an earlier book by Ryan and our mutual friend Stephen Hanselman.
Yes.
Shout out to Steve.
Steve was
And
actually the driving factor behind both books. Steve was like, "Hey, I think you should do." Steve is my agent. He's your agent for people who don't know. Steve was like, "You should do a book of one page a day of the Stoics of the Stoics." And I said, "But I don't know how to translate." And he said, "Oh, I'll do that part." And I said, "But I don't know who reads those." And he was like, "You will have fun writing it, and it will be your best-selling book." And I was like, "Okay, this sounds like something your agent would tell you." And
you got to
yeah,
know Steve, and he's very convincing. And the most like
yeah,
he just says something and then looks wide eyed at you and waits for you to respond. And you're like,
yeah.
fuck.
And he's right. It's been the book it's not quite my best selling book, but it's close, and it'll have a better year this year than last year and the year before and the year before. So it's been this really strange, surreal journey. And then afterwards, he said, "I think we should do a biography of all the Stoics." And I said, uh, "I don't think anyone will read that." And he's like, "No, we'll figure it out." And we ended up doing it's like the first book is like, what did the Stoics say? What is Stoicism? And then the second book is like, but who were the Stoics? How do they actually live to these ideas? And it's been really cool to do both of them.
Well, it's a fascinating um, area to hang your hat because I most people don't know this, but I was in a PhD program in philosophy and had my undergraduate degree was in philosophy and having read a lot of philosophy, including Stoic philosophy, it is fascinating to me your ability to translate that philosophy and make it relatable and valuable and connect it to modern popular culture, which clearly, again, you sold, I'll call it millions, but we don't need to fill in the actual number of books, and in an area of ancient wisdom and its application to current times. Why is that true? Why is that possible?
I don't know.
How?
I don't know. It doesn't. I mean, it's one of those things that feels very natural to me. So it's somewhat baffling to me that it's not all like that all the time. Do you know what I mean? Um, I don't get what the purpose of writing philosophy that's not accessible to people is. It's funny too because like some people get mad about the books and they'll
Who gets
say,
mad? What?
well, no, like people say, "Oh, you're monetizing philosophy, right?" You're and at first that I was like, "Is that true?" And then I thought, you know, you're a tenured university professor. You're also monetizing philosophy. You're just
Right.
monetizing it to 100 students a semester, in while their parents are paying $50,000 a year for them to attend your classes, and I'm selling it to people in the form of books that cost $15 on Amazon. I'm not sure I'm the one that has to look in the mirror with any sort of shame about what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
to me, the purpose of philosophy is that it's supposed to reach people and make their lives better. It seems, in retrospect, quite strange to me that philosophy should be ghettoized in academia and only accessible to people who speak this ridiculously artificial language of sort of academic philosophy like it
Yeah. And
both
have
are, you know
tweed
what I mean?
patches on their elbow, tweed
Yeah,
elbow patches, right?
right, or a turtleneck or whatever.
Well, this makes me want to bring up a quote from Seneca, which is all study of philosophy and reading should be for the purpose of living a happy life.
Yeah,
So is it truly that simple
I think
that
so. I mean, I opened the book, so I was trying to figure out, like, I wrote a bunch of different versions of the intro. Like, I wrote a version I was really happy with. Then my editor didn't like it. And so I redid it that she was very happy with. And then I really didn't like it. And right as the book was about to go to print, I was walking along the Colorado River right before the pandemic, and this phrase just sort of, and I went back to my desk and I tore up the intro, and I opened the book with, the only reason to study philosophy is to become a better person. And I think when Seneca is saying happy, the Stoic definition of happy doesn't just mean like feel good all the time. So that word can be difficult to, that the way he's expressing it can be a little bit confusing. To me, it's like philosophy is supposed to make you better ethically, better morally, better, you know, uh,
strategically?
every
Yeah.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
wiser. Like the four virtues of Stoicism are courage, justice, wisdom, and temperance. So it's supposed to make you better in those four areas, which to me creates a well-rounded person. So I think, yeah. I mean, what are, like, so Elon Musk has sort of popularized this philosophical question of like, how do we know that we're not living in a computer simulation, right? And that's a philosophical question, right?
Yeah, philosophy. My philosophy classes when I was a sophomore in college were considering that. How are we not in a giant simulation?
Yeah. So, I mean, here's a better question. What the fuck would that change if it were true? What are you supposed to do with that information? It's like a math problem, but the answer doesn't mean anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
wouldn't change anything. I mean, it doesn't change a single thing. Uh, Except maybe if you are, you should kill yourself, which is already a philosophical question. You know what I mean? Like that's already a problem of life. So I think to me, the purpose of philosophy, the purpose of Stoicism, is so much more urgently necessary than what a lot of people assume philosophy is.
That's part to me what is so extraordinary about this arc of books that you have written over the past half a dozen years. And in particular, the one that I'm holding up right now, those of you who are listening and not watching, you don't get the benefit. The lives of the Stoics is retrace, like was talking about going back to the source, or like what is the life of a Stoic? What was it
Yeah.
like? And in this was really interesting for me because I hadn't studied, as I mentioned, I sort of gravitated toward artist biographies rather than philosopher biographies, even though I come from a background of philosophy. So in the process of dissecting and devouring the lives of Stoic philosophers, were you well, let me say, not were you surprised, because I'm guessing there had to be some surprises. Let's say,
Yes.
what surprised you the most about the lives that they led?
Well, so I present Cicero and Seneca as two interesting philosophers that I think feel very modern in how ambitious they were. They had this sense of like, if I could just get like famous enough or powerful enough or important enough, then everything will be good. Maybe it's like, then dad will be proud of me, then I can make a difference, and this drive really gets them both into trouble in a lot of ways. So I thought
Seneca the
that,
Striver, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and Cicero was like, Cicero's kind of a guy who talked about it but didn't believe it, and he's sort of using it as a means to an end. So it was just interesting. Was like, people are people. Like, people have always, it's. I think that's another interesting part. It's like, when you study philosophy, you spend a lot of time thinking about what people say. You don't spend much time examining how that looks in the real world. Um, and if the purpose of philosophy is to live a better life, we really do need to think about, you know how has this worked historically. And so that was kind of the premise of the book. Is like, well, what did Marcus Aurelius look like? How did the philosophy help him, and how did it hurt him? How did it help Cato do some good things, and where did he fall short of his own advice in other places? So I just wanted to look at who these people were as human beings, which is not something we do very often.
Yeah.
Um, like, nobody thinks, like, if you are a Harvard philosophy professor, you know you're judged on the books that you publish or the papers that you write. No one would ask, like, well, what have you ever done? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And how have you lived your life
Yeah,
according to the philosophers that you espouse?
right.
Well, that's one thing that the reason my sort of line of questioning here is around it's it is surprisingly modern. That's the lens that the lives of the Stoic and it maybe it's like Nietzsche's eternal return. Like everything, comes, is historical and comes back again. Part of, when someone's sitting there like, okay, cool, I really like Ryan's stuff. Ego is the enemy. Well, that's cool. That's really about ego. And that's the thing that I have to put in check for myself, or, anything else. But the, biographical, this is absolutely historical, and yet it's repeating itself in real time right in front of you at every moment of your day. It is unbelievably contemporary to dissect the lives of so many of the smartest people in our past.
Well, I was thinking about this morning. Like, people are like, well, when will things go back to normal? And it's like, this is normal. This is normal. Like, pandemics are normal. Civil unrest is normal. I mean, I was thinking, like, look at the last 20 years. In 2000, we had a contested election where a candidate lost the popular vote. We had a terrorist attack where thousands of Americans died. Then there was SARS and Ebola and other pandemics. Then we had a major financial recession. Like it. This is normal. Try to find me a decade in which the kinds of stuff that have happened over the last 3 or 4 years are not the norm. Like, this
Yeah.
is what life is. I mean, Marcus Aurelius was writing meditations during what we now call the Antonine Plague, which was a pandemic that originated in the Far East and then spread throughout the empire, the Roman Empire, and it brought the most powerful country in the world to its knees. You know what I mean? Like, It, it, I I was thinking about this with the Spanish influenza. Like the president of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, caught the Spanish flu, just like Donald Trump did. History is the same thing happening over and over and over again. There's nothing new under the sun, as it says in the Bible. Um, it's not that what I'm writing about is modern. It's that this stuff is timeless.
Talk to me about the female Stoics, because I believe that most Stoicism historically, for obvious reasons, when I say history, there's so gender biased.
Yeah.
But you share about like Portia Cato and the Roman senator Tracea. Is that right? How do you say that?
Oh,
Tracea?
Thrasea. He's a
Tracea.
man,
Oh, okay.
but his wife is sort of a
Oh, that's
prominent
his
sort of
wife is
stoic badass. But no,
yeah,
that was something that was really important in the book because yes, stoicism can feel like a very male philosophy.
yeah.
Obviously, one of the interesting things about having a platform is you see like sort of who the fans actually are, and I can see what percentage of the readers and the Facebook fans and stuff are women. And it's a much larger percentage than people would think. And I think the real reason is I think anyone, obviously anyone that's married to a woman or anyone that's spent time around women knows that of the two genders, women are actually probably much more stoic as a rule than men are. Um, you know, I was thinking about that too historically, and I put it in the book. It's like you know the fact that women are, I think, as a rule, more stoic than men, um, and then you know didn't complain about men taking all the credit for 2,000 years is probably the ultimate testament of it. Um, but my wife likes to joke in our relationship. One of us is a stoic, and then one of us writes about stoicism. So it was very important to me to put a female Stoic in the book. There are obviously historically not as many of them as
Yeah.
sort of with enough material around it that I could craft a chapter. But Cato, one of the famous towering Roman Stoics, teaches his daughter philosophy, and she's integral in the plot to assassinate Julius Caesar, and is a well known Stoic. And then another Stoic, Musonius Rufus, writes a few hundred years after Cato that he's like, look, you don't care whether a horse is a male or a female, or a hunting dog is a male or a female. Like, what matters is, do they fulfill the qualities that you're looking for in a dog or a horse? And he's like, virtue doesn't care if you're a man or a woman. It's do you have the components of that thing? Yes or no?
I thought that was interesting, and it jumped off the page that was part of the book, and I found it timely and very interesting, especially grounding it in the way you have there with who's actually living the philosophy. So I'm going to step away from the specifics of the book again. Like what floored me is how modern and how contemporary uh, the extract, what I was able to extract from the book. But I want to talk about the process because as someone who's
Okay.
now written 10 books, um, there's so much to dissect about 10 books. That is a Herculean effort. And you don't look like you're slowing down anytime soon. So what I like to do, in the same way our mutual friend Tim that you mentioned, he doesn't want to look at an ultra marathoner. He wants to look at an ultra marathoner that's like 220 pounds and has no, genetic, like how have they done this? Because that will tell you some of the real secrets rather than someone who was born into a culture that running was whatever, or they have a different physical disposition. So what
Sure.
I go to in those situations is process. Like, how does the person achieve those results consistently? And that's what I'm hoping you can share with us, because 10 books, my God, having, written one myself, it's a lift. It's monstrous. So what's your process?
Um, I had Michelle Watterson on my podcast, the MMA fighter, recently, and we were talking about like the hardest thing to be a fighter is like you have to train for a fight, right? And you have to get to like your fighting weight. part of my sort of writing creative philosophy is like I don't do the ups and downs of it. Like I'm just always doing it. You know what I mean? So instead of like, I think part of the reason that the book was hard for you is one, you have a day job, and then you were like, okay, I'm gonna go write a book, right? You didn't say like, I am a writer. This is what I do now. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
So it's like you had to do all the work that I have to do on a book, but you did it almost like a, what do they call, the mandala, where it's like you build it and then it just
Yeah.
all goes away. I,
The wind
I
blows it away. Yeah.
yeah, I set up, I have a permanent system. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's a system, and I'm always writing, always working. And like when lives came out in September, the end of September, I was putting the finishing touches on the next book, and now that book is starting to go, and like I'll probably turn that book in the next week or two, and then I'll probably take a, like, a slight break, like for the holidays or whatever. But I'll still be thinking about the next idea. But like I'll probably get very serious about the next book, like around the beginning of the year, like early January probably. So like for me, I just don't. I'm
You're
you
never
know
not at your fighting weight.
yeah, exactly.
So staying in creative shape, that's in part what my book and what this audience knows to be true from me, at least, that creativity is a habit more than it is a skill. And this
Yes,
idea of doing something every day, in the case of, in your case, writing every day, or in the case of someone who is a fitness trainer, or like the idea of never getting out of shape. Of course, life happens and things
right.
wax and wane, but can you tell us a little bit about your daily? Like, what's the daily look for you? I've heard you talk about it a lot, and I'm sure it's evolving, but many of the things stay the same. So, what are the constant sort of non-negotiables in your creative practice? Because saying I write every day is,
Yeah.
that says a lot in itself, but there are people right now like, all right, when does Ryan write?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely take days off, but for me, it's like I'm always working on a project and I'm always doing something that'll get me a little bit closer. But I get up early. I don't go straight into phone or social media. And then I try to do my writing as early as possible. Like I try to go right into that. And whether it's for 20 minutes or it's for 4 consecutive hours, the point is like I'm putting in work every day. And I think people have trouble conceptualizing that that's really the only way to do a book. I mean, you wake up every day and you put in some work. Like today, the work I was putting in was I had two note cards of stuff that I'd written down the night before, of little things that I was tweaking on a book that's probably 95% done. So it was okay. Pull up, go to that page, grab the stuff from the notes, work on it. That's what I was doing today. I mean, flashback 6 months, the stuff I was tweaking today didn't exist, and I was having to make it up from scratch. But it's what's the small part of the large task that you're tackling today? That's really my writing philosophy.
And you do it early in the day so that things can't steal your time.
Yeah, well, it's not steal the time. It's like Stephen Pressfield. Where is it? The War of Art, which everyone should read. Um, Pressfield talks about the resistance, and I think it's more like the resistance gains power throughout the day. And so early in the day, it's like you cross a river at the source, not at its widest point. And early in the day, there's less resistance because there's less things to feel resistance about. There's less opportunities for it. And so I just try, I get it done, and then if other things happen, other things happen.
Parallel to creative process, I'm an advocate of creative cross training.
Yeah.
So I try and have a number of projects going at the same time. One might be my job that is, either building Creative Live, or any major task that's not leaving the building anytime soon.
Right.
And things like writing books and making videos for social. This podcast is a great example. Um, and I usually have a half a dozen other, personal projects that are going on that are maybe not going to be so public, like, remodeling my house or designing a new fill in the blank. And what I've noticed as your friend, that you are also branching out. You're doing more video work,
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
and I am seeing this expression sort of manifest in different media. And I'm wondering if you can, I haven't heard
Yeah.
you talk. I haven't heard you talk about this before, so I'm curious.
So I've always been a big believer that like so I like books and that's ultimately I'm a writer. That's what I identify with. That's what I want to do. I want people to read my writing. But I also understand that's not like the medium that everyone defaults to. And so you have a podcast or you have articles or you have videos or talks or what you have all these other things that bring people into that. But video, for whatever reason, was something I was intimidated by. I don't know why. I think so. One of the things I've realized about myself is like I have trouble doing stuff for nobody. So like I started investing in video maybe two or so years ago, and I would kind of like someone would come and film me talking about some stuff, and then that would go up, and then we'd take clips from my talks, and that would go up. And as the YouTube channel grew to be like, now we have about 250,000 subscribers. Now I'm just now, like in the last like month or two, I felt some sort of transition where I'm like, oh, there's an audience here. I can put creative energy towards speaking in this medium. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. There's and that's probably not the healthiest attitude, but I guess what I'm saying is like I've just now like now that I know that it's not a waste of time, I feel more comfortable. Like I got some different cameras and I'm like really teaching myself how to use the cameras. And I'm starting to like think about like, okay, like I got to put the camera here, and then I'll walk. Like I'm actually thinking in that medium, which I was
Mhm.
never doing before. It was just like, oh, we have to do some videos. Like, tell me where you want me to stand. You know what I mean? What do I have to say again? And so but it's been fun and it's been going better and better. And I don't know, now I'm sort of into the challenge of it. And it's been fun. So yeah, I'm definitely doing more video and hopefully it sort of, brings more people into the universe, but it's been also just creatively interesting.
Yeah. It's Do you have a process of bouncing back and forth between a couple of different, media, or is it all in service of one thing, and is the media just a downstream effect of where audience lives? Like,
That's a
how
good
I know
question.
I'm curious the way you think about it.
I think it's for me it's like look at the end of the day I think you want to be very clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So it's like for me it's like books. That's what I feel like I can do better than anyone or really good, and that's why I'm doing it. So at the end of the day it's about driving people back towards that thing. Um, and then that also helps define my schedule, which is like writing in the morning and then like yeah, then I'll do podcasts like now, or I'll do, after this, there's a video thing I was going to shoot really fast. So I'll do it like that. It is important that, if you're everywhere, you can be nowhere. So it is
Mhm.
really important that you kind of have some clear prioritization. I've definitely seen writers get, sort of corrupted by or broken by Twitter or something where it's like this medium is so much easier that you're just like pursuing it at the expense of the really hard skill you should be practicing.
That's fascinating. Say more about that.
Well, it's like writing books is really fucking hard. Like it's really hard. Um, Writing a tweet. I'm not saying writing a tweet is easy, and there's definitely people who are masters of it. I'm just saying like if you want the dopamine hit, the validation of being seen and heard, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter are much, much easier than spending 2 years of your life on a
Yeah.
book. So if you're really just doing this for the attention, I think a lot of the reason people are suddenly making podcasts is they're like, oh shit, you can make money doing this. And it's so much easier than the other thing. It's just you just get a microphone and you talk. In reality, it's hard to do it well. But
Yeah.
I think it's like, look, at the end of your life, are you going to be proud of the thousands of hours of podcast interviews you did? Or is there going to be that you did on like a one-off basis, or are you going to be prouder of like the real works of art that you made?
Fascinating. I I want to talk about writing.
Okay.
So you are a writer, and
Yeah.
what a lot of people don't know about me is that I saw myself as a writer long before a photographer, and I was just very impatient, and so I went from writing to painting to from oil painting to acrylic painting, and ended up at photography because it was so immediate and it served the need that I felt as a creator. I just wanted to be able to create, volume was important because that's feedback. The feedback
Sure.
loop was just, it was high reps on the feedback loop. But there's something that I cannot ignore. And I got away from writing. And that's part of the reason that I wrote Creative Calling, is because there was so much material and it needed to be packaged in a different way. It was required that I put it out there. I mean, for me personally, required to put it out there that way. And in doing that, writing became a habit again. And it was amazing. And what I've found is that it provided a certain clarity for me that I did not have without it. So I am here trying to get your opinion on the value of writing. There's people who are listening right now that are from needlepoint to ceramists to CEOs to athletes. I try not to be prescriptive, but I am at a point right now where I would like to prescribe the act of writing. And I'm curious what Ryan Holiday, a writer, would say to that, and if there's disproportionate value, or why writing should be done by more people.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, to me, it's the most challenging of the mediums, and it's the most durable and meaningful. I don't know. I there's something about sitting down and trying to marshal your thoughts into sentence form that is. I mean, obviously, painting and sculpture and these other forms of art are really old, but I mean, so much of the great works of human history are stories, like are
Yeah,
writing, and it's it's the right, like Twain said that the difference between the right word and the wrong word is like lightning and lightning bug. It's just like when you fucking nail it, it's just like so good, and to have that experience of like, oh, here's what it looks like when you really articulate your thoughts exactly as they were in your head. There's just you wake up I wake up every day excited about that challenge, and I think if you haven't done it or you're scared of it, you should try it.
well, just the way that I have started to think about it, and I'd be curious to get your take on my take, is that like writing is so seminal. Think about films or TV shows. They're all written first.
Yep.
Like, it's further upstream in the process, and there's this sort of immediacy of and clarity of what's in my melon, getting it into a way that's shareable. And it forces two things. It forces A, just the getting out, but B, getting out in a way that you can try and or make someone else feel or experience. You want to get as close as you can to what's going on in your brain, and mastering the language and structure and syntax, and even just the immediacy of the idea, because shit, our brain it's impermanent, right? The things that, oh, that's a great idea, what do you say? Oh, I'm going to remember that for later. And then an hour later, you're like, fuck, what was I thinking? What was that thing again? It's like getting it on the page somehow takes it from this fuzzy ethereal to something concrete. I want you to
I I
respond
I
to that.
I totally agree. There's something magical about it. I mean, look, I'm always jealous of musicians because there's an immediacy and a power to music that writing doesn't have. But
Mhm.
um, I mean, look, there's a reason books are really special to people. Books have occupied a place in culture for a couple thousand years, and I don't think that's going anywhere. And I just it's what I like. It's what I feel like I was born to do. So that's what I spend my time on. It weirdly, I don't spend that much time thinking about this question because it just seems like it's like
It's
to
automatic.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. Yeah, to me, it's just like, of course, it's like intrinsically. undeniably the best. But I'm sure that says something more about me than it does about writing.
What about morning pages, for example, like Julia Cameron, the prescription? Like this is part of.
I do journaling, but not morning. I mean, I guess they're morning pages. I do journaling, but it's not really part of my creative exercise at all. It's more like my mental health
Mental.
exercise. But
Yeah.
um,
Well,
yeah, I
take
mean,
us through
even
that. Just unpack that a little bit because I think your mental health and the things that you do to take care of yourself. That's part of why I'm hanging my hat on writing because it's
yeah.
so it manifests in lots of ways as as sort of foundational, and it is a form of mental health, or can be, if it's just like there's so many virtues to it that I'm starting to, as whether it's as maturity or wisdom or maybe it's ignorance, I don't know, I'm starting to find more and more value in writing things down. But help me
Yeah,
understand
it's about
your mental health part.
for me, it's about getting it out of my head and onto the page. That's really what it is. Because then once it's on the page, it's not in my head anymore, and then, and then it's not my problem. I think there's just something powerful about getting it out, and I think in some ways, that's the creative urge. It's like I got this thing inside me, and I want to get it out. Maybe for some people that's a painting, some people that's a song, some people that's a poem, some people that's a movie. For me it's writing, or it's in the journal or whatever, but it's just about getting it out.
Speaking of getting it out, is that what Stoics did? Were
I think
they?
so. I mean, meditations is Marcus Aurelius talking to himself, you know and Seneca's plays are clearly commentaries on the tyrants of his time. So I think there's always a personal element to it, and then there's like what you're trying to say. There's the personal and the philosophical, I think.
I think it's fascinating that I believe all of them were writers.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. Maybe that's why I like it so much.
What's next in Stoicism for you? Clearly, just I want to build out a little bit
Yeah.
of the structure, and I'll probably have a couple missteps in here. You can correct me, but I want to lay this out and let you respond to it. So, you've been writing about Stoicism from ego
Hmm.
and the Daily Stoic, Lives of the Stoic, the book that we're talking about here, which I cannot recommend enough. Again, it's incredibly modern and contemporary, and it's so practical. You've got the Daily Stoic newsletter. You've got the podcast, which is tied to the newsletter, separate, different media, but similar. And so you've got this an entire ecosystem now. And is that the marketer in you that's trying to build the surround sound, or is
No,
this?
there's a little bit of that. I mean, I also can see, sort of the opportunities in it, and how like the different things all support each other. And like, look, it's not easy. Like, I think sometimes people go, "Oh, why are you doing all this stuff?" It's like, well, it's not free to host a pod. Like, I mean, it's cheap in some ways, but it's like, like the podcast and the videos and the stuff. The whole ecosystem supports itself,
Yeah.
right? And the videos drive people to the books, but the videos aren't free to make. I have to pay someone,
Yeah.
and so it's like there's a whole ecosystem there. I think for me next, I've got sort of a series of books that I'm working on that'll be inspired by Stoicism. I'm not really talking about them yet, but yeah, just I think at the end of the day, it's about the writing, it's about the books, so it all supports the ability to do the books, and then to bring the books to as many people as they can help.
What are your thoughts on mastery? Focusing on one thing to get good enough that you might be able to understand what it feels like to have command of a medium, or uh, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I mean, writing is the thing that I'm trying to master. The other things I'm doing to drive my mastery of writing. You know what I mean? Like I was saying earlier, you got to know what you're doing it all for, and if you don't, I don't think you'll end up getting there.
Well said. Now, for those of you out there who, for whom this is your first exposure experience to Ryan, welcome to the party. Um, Ryan, I want to just give you a shout out. You've been doing this at a very, very high level for a long time, and it's fun to see all the success. Indeed, we share a book agent and lots of friends, but it's been really fun to see this explosion of your work and to have it being read by pro athletes and senators and world leaders and business leaders. Has that been joyful for you?
Yeah, it's been really awesome, man. And no, I appreciate it. I think you were like the first interview I ever really did. So I appreciate you help kicking it all off.
No, that was back in 2012 with your first book, Trust Me, I'm
Yeah.
Lying, which was so prescient, so ahead of its time. And here we are in a world where people are where truth is actually
Oh,
a
I don't even want to
head
think
scratch
about it.
for some people. I know we don't need to go back to that, but I think there's so much career arcs are fascination of mine, and it's just been so fun to see the work that you've been putting out there, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. And thankful for those of us who are not just friends but fans that we get to keep seeing your work out there in the world. So I want to say thanks a lot. Congratulations. For those who don't have it yet, Lives of the Stoics. It's the latest must-have from Ryan and our mutual homie Steve Hanselman. Anything where you're going to steer people, like if you, of course, from
Yeah,
picking up a copy of the book, but what is there anything else where you'd want people to get into your orbit a little more? Where would they go?
let's do dailystoic.com. That's the hub for all of it.
Cool. Congratulations, bud. Thanks again for being on the show. Always happy to
You're the
have you here.
best.